Welcome back to my Legends Expanded Universe chronological timeline rating, where I go through the expanded universe according to my chronological timeline and rate every individual piece of EU media on a 10-point scale. Today we have some very heavy reading, very interesting reading, but heavy reading nonetheless. There is quite a lot of substance to this story, and I won't be able to go into and break down every nuance of this. I will have to just give a brief overview because, my goodness, there is a lot of information in this. And of course that means that I'm talking about Zim the Despotica, a 4-part short story series written by Michael Kogge, published in 2009, that take place in the timeline around 25,200 BBY. These short stories were published on StarWars.com, and in addition to Michael Kogge writing it, the illustrations were by Cat Staggs. And I thought about splitting the different parts into different reviews, but I decided to do them all together. Part 1 of Zim the Despotica is called Selections. And Selections is just kind of an introduction, and it mentions some interesting things, such as Zim is the person they love to hate in the galaxy. Although there were criminals who did worse things than him, I'll put in a controversial real-world example. Hitler killed lots of people. Evil man, right? But Stalin and Mao Zedong in history killed more people than Hitler ever did. Yet Hitler's the person we love to hate. We still talk about Hitler. Stalin and Mao Zedong slide under the radar a little bit in comparison. So although he was not the baddest, he was more in the media than others, similar to with Zim, I would say, based on this short story. And it's very interesting because it mentioned that there's lots of in-universe short stories and novels recounting the exploits of Zim, and treasure maps for where his treasures are, and tours you can take to go see the landmarks of the atrocities that he committed. So very interesting. He's almost like an infamous celebrity, like a Blackbeard the pirate type of figure. So mythological and hailed as such a just figure that's so otherworldly to the people in the Star Wars galaxy, because his exploits are literally legend. And so I found that all very interesting. But what's very interesting here is it also mentions that it's hard to separate fact from fiction with Zim. What did Zim actually do? Now, other short stories tell us a lot of what Zim actually did, like War Portrait, Boon the Hutt, The Gleam of Kareem. Lots of stuff gives us explanations for the true Zim and what he really did. But this goes on to say that to describe the Despotica, and the Despotica is an in-universe play in the Star Wars universe, and it gives an introduction to what's fact, what's fiction, who is the real Zim the Despot of history, and who is the Zim the Despotica from the play that is galaxy-wide famous, that is more myth, and the lines between may be blurred. So it's just kind of the Zim the Despotica, the Despotica Part 1 Selections is just kind of introducing you to the concept of an in-universe play that details the exploits of the mythological figure of Zim. And it's kind of making you question, who was he? What did he really do? Why is he so famous? Why are his atrocities still being talked about? Why is no one forgotten about him? Why is he so popular? And, the galaxy loves to hate him. I thought all of that was super interesting. It also talked about the origins of the Despotica play, and where it came from and where it was written, and later we even see some art of some Celestins performing the play, which is just really cool. So part two of Zim the Despot is called of the Despotica. I keep saying Zim the Despotica. It's just simply called the Despotica. Part two is called the Pirate Prince. Now these parts of the story, parts 2 to 4, are almost entirely just the play script itself, and not even all of it. It mentions that these are fragments of the full version, similar to how in the first story I reviewed, A Soldier's Story, Neutron in Flames, that story consisted of a portion of an epic poem called De Worde Verda. Only a portion of it is what the story consisted of. So here, we're told that this is a fraction of the whole play. So these are selections from the Despotica in-universe play. And the Pirate Prince details Zim and his early exploits as a pirate prince, following in his father's footsteps. And he actually has a sort of sidekick, a sort of squire, whose name is Oziaf. And Oziaf is a Tintin dwarf, also called Tintina. And Tintina, there are species that look like mice. West End Games expanded on them quite a bit. But they first appeared in the Star Wars Holiday Special. So that is quite an interesting thing to note there. Love Holiday Special connections, always great. So the Pirate Prince tells of his early exploits. Then Zim at Vontor details when he's becoming more famous. In this play, it details his further conquests and how he is further doubling down on becoming renowned for his cunning and his skills and his ruthlessness. Zim at Vontor details his next battles. And the final part is called Evocar. The Despotica Part 4 Evocar is the fourth and final part to the Zim the Despot series of stories. And it continues with the screenwrite. It's got a little bit more information about where it came from and what kind of part this is to do with it. And it details the kind of end of Zim's life through to his capture and eventual execution by the Hutts. So it really dramatizes and romanticizes the life of Zim. This really reminded me the writing style, which I absolutely love the writing style of the playwright section of this story. It reminded me of like something from Shakespeare or perhaps the Odyssey, which was a Greek epic by Homer. Parts of this really reminded me of the Odyssey. It's really well written. It's really fun. You can see how some of this might be true, and some of this fits with other stories and what they tell us about Zim, and some of it is just very romanticized, for an audience. So it's very interesting that this short story really makes you think, what was Zim? And it just adds to this mystery and how cool the character of Zim is. So I really enjoyed this 4-part series. I'm going to rank them individually. The first part really was thought-provoking, but it's really just an exposition dump to set up what's to come in the short story. I would give it 3 of 10. It's fine. Part 2, The Pirate Prince, was my favorite. I'd give it a 5 of 10. I really enjoyed the characters presented in it. Oziaf was an interesting character. Learning about young Zim's mindset, if that's truly how young Zim's mindset was. Part 3, Zim at Vontor, was fine. It was not as good as The Pirate Prince. I'd give it a 5. And Evocar was very solid. I'd probably give it a 6. But it's not as good as The Pirate Prince. But Evocar was solid too. All of these plays are really epic, really cool how they're romanticized. They're written in such a great way to where even though you're reading a play, it's really it flows really well too. Even though it's kind of supposed to be split up and kind of choppy, the flow of the story is really really easy to follow at the same time. So I'd encourage everyone to go read this. You gotta get through the first part selections. It's a bit of a slog, yes. There's a lot of information though. You don't have to take all of it in. if you can get through that, the last three parts are just golden. And I highly recommend the Despotica parts 1 to 4. Michael Kogge did an incredible job writing this, and the little illustrations we got too are fun as well. You'll see some of those illustrations on the screen, I'm sure. So what about you guys? Well, I will rank it overall too. The mean average would probably be a 5 of 10 for the Despotica parts 1 to 4. But what about you guys? What would you give the parts of this short story, which is actually quite long? It's probably like 40 pages. When you add them all together, it's more like a novella, because each one is like 9 to 14-ish pages. So adding them all together, you get quite a lot of story. But what would you guys give this out of 10? Either the parts or all together. Did you guys enjoy this? I really think this is good, and more people should read this for sure. Because I never really hear anyone talking about it. People know who Zim is, but people really need to read this to get to know who Zim could have been. It's really solid.